everyone's gone incredibly quiet except Leedsy. No, I can start. All right, welcome. I feel very formal now that I've got a mic on. It's karaoke. All right, I would love to introduce Wade Kingsley, who is a dear friend of SCA's. Wade has been 20 years in the media industry, of which he's had agency roles as well as been in radio business, working very closely with, in the creative side, working with creative heads, with the writers, the producers, the talent. So he's had to manage all those egos and ensure that we get the best ideas that we can deliver back to our clients. Now Wade has gone out on his own. The Ideas business has recently been formed, and the essence of it is to actually work with clients to actually get them better at creating and stimulating ideas and thinking. So we're very privileged to have him here today. Off you go. Well done.
Thank you.
That was a bad end to a speech.
No, today.
You can't. No, it's just, I'm relaxed.
There's a croak. There's a slight croak. I've got the man flu, but I think you've got a little bit of
all that talking.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be up here. I was just saying to Simon that I left Melbourne Tullamarine this morning. It was 3 degrees, so you'll be happy to know that since you've left Melbourne, nothing's changed. And it was pretty frosty, and so my voice is a bit croaky today, apologies, because I did catch that Tullamarine breeze on the way up. But it's lovely to be here. As Andrea said, I have been with SCA and Nova and in Agency World for around about 20 years, and the reason I decided to go out on my own and start the Ideas business was there was a moment where I kind of thought that the way that all businesses produce ideas is pretty similar. There are different executions of that form, but really what we largely do as an industry, whether that's marketing, media agencies, publisher side, whatever, is we kind of come up with ideas the same way. And I thought that was interesting because it said to me there was an opportunity to perhaps do something different, and we all like different. And so what I wanted to take you through today, while you tuck into the delicious things that are on your table, is just a little bit of thoughts around unlocking the potential in you and your teams to get some better ideas. And there's some stuff that I've observed over those 20 years with the great creators, the guys that do it really well, about what they do. And I fully believe that coming up with ideas is a technique that can be learnt. It's not something that you have to be born with. It's not that magical lightning bolt that comes from the sky and you assume that you're creative or you're not. As a way of example, who here thinks they're creative? Okay, yeah, right. So the trouble with that question is the question, because we don't have the confidence to say that we are creative, right? That it's a flawed logic to think that people have to be creative to come up with ideas. They don't. They're two different things. So I'm going to take you through a little bit up here while you eat and drink, and by all means, if you've got any questions along the way, let me know. So yeah, the Ideas business was effectively formed to understand the answers to these two questions. How do people currently create ideas? And how do we help them generate better ideas? So I'm working with businesses to help them with their idea generation. I've spent a long time generating ideas myself, but now I really see an opportunity to help businesses in the way they generate them for themselves. A little bit of a call out to start with. What's the difference between idea generators and creatives? And the analogy I've used on the screen there is the cook and the chef. So if I asked any one of you to go into the kitchen right now and cook us a 3-course meal, most would struggle. Are there any chefs here? No? Good. Most would struggle. But that doesn't mean we can't cook. And so what usually happens with the idea generation process is we don't see ourselves as creative. Therefore, we don't attempt to come up with ideas. We usually outsource that to the creatives in our organisation or people that we know. But I firmly believe that idea generation is actually a technique like cooking that you can learn, and it doesn't mean you have to be a 5-star chef, but you can still put food on the table. And the idea generation process is something that if it's done well, you can generate a lot of ideas really quickly and really good ideas. You don't have to aim to be a creative. So the question, are you creative, is a bad question because it forces people to, if they've got the confidence, go, yeah, I'm pretty creative, or if they don't, think that they can't do it. And that's not right. So as we go through today, remember we're focusing on idea generators, teaching people how to cook rather than be chefs. What is an idea? there's lots of definitions. Is it something, a thought that can be executed? Is it a campaign idea in our context? Is it a marketing execution? Really, an idea is the coming together of two or more existing thoughts into something new. It's not starting from scratch. That's the common myth about ideas. People think that you actually have to have something brand new, but nothing is brand new. Nothing is brand new. Uber's a new execution of ride sharing and people paying for it, right? So there's different ways you can combine ingredients or combine elements to create the new. Going back early century, Ira Gershwin, who with his brother George created a lot of great songs, and I think this expression applies equally to ideas. A song is two arts under emotional pressure coalescing into a third. So the two arts in songs obviously are lyrics and music coming together to form a third, which is a song. Ideas are the same. You take something from here, you take something from there, and together they create something new. Another way to put it is there's the original and there's the remix. Everything is a remix of something else in various degrees. There is nothing actually original anymore. And while that sounds really sad, it's true. And one of the things that stops people feeling like they're confident about being creative is, I can't create something original. I can't get out there and do something new. But you haven't been taught to cook yet. So that's what we're going to try and do a bit of today. So question for you guys. What is your current idea generation process that you have in your organisations? Because, Andrea, of course you'd be first. Go.
10 people in a room.
Yep, 10 people in a room.
All yelling out ideas.
All yelling out
very
ideas.
Executional.
All very executional, yep.
And the most important person in the room shooting down the ideas.
Yep.
Getting up to their favourite ideas.
Yep, that's right. Does that sound familiar to everyone? What other people do in their business? Do you have a process? If I was to say to you, do you have a fire safety process? You probably have one. Do you have an expense claim process? You probably have one. Do you have a health and safety process? Do you have a recruitment process? Yeah, it's amazing to me that really the thing that separates us from our competitors and what all our customers, whether they be clients or our eventual customer, use us for is ideas, yet most businesses don't have a process to get those ideas. Or if they do, they have brainstorming. And they just execute brainstorming in different fashions, right, as Andrea was demonstrating. But largely, people don't have a process for generating ideas. So the first place to start is to actually have one, to recognise you need the recipe to cook with and to write the recipe. And that doesn't mean you get formulaic with it. This is exactly how we create ideas, guys, from A to Z. Step one, do this. Step two, do this. Doesn't mean you do it that way. But you do have to have a level of understanding so the people in your organisation understand how you want ideas created. One of the answers I often get when asked that question is people say, we've got a great room. Got a great room. Okay, cool. And for some people, the room looks a bit like this. And I go, that's a meeting room. That's where you have meetings. Do you do your idea generation in the same room as your meetings? Oh, yeah, but we make it fun. Okay, how do you make it fun? Oh, we put some funky lights and some chairs in there, and it looks great. It looks a bit more creative. Okay, it's still a meeting room, even though it's now got funky chairs. Oh, actually, no, we've got one special room in the organisation. We put all these words up on it that say, like, ideas. And, if you put ideas, the word on the wall, then people start going, oh, yeah, we can get ideas because it says, ideas, and let's take risks, and there's great quotes. And yeah, it still looks a little bit like a meeting room to me. Okay, what do you use the room for? Oh, well, what we do is we get people in and they've got flip charts and coloured pens and fun things happen, they get around. Any of this sounding familiar? Right, this is what most people do. Most businesses do this. And what's the end result of these kind of stock image fun people looking like they're having fun with flip charts and texters? Oh, lots of post-it notes, gathered around the room, it's all very exciting, things coming together. Okay. And what do you end up with? We end up with a pile of ideas. Great. That's awesome. Does that work? Who knows? What have you got it to benchmark it against? If it's the only way you're doing it, then that's it. The other thing that people do is they don't do that, and they go and find people in their organisation who look like this and say, hey, you guys are the creatives, you come up with the ideas. They always look like that. There's always two of them, and one is always wearing a hat. Why is one always wearing a hat? That's true. So the creatives get the job, so the individual has outsourced their responsibility to go into the kitchen and cook, and they've gone to the chefs and gone, oh, you guys know this much better than me. You're the creatives, you do it. And I reckon that's a cop-out too. So the two ways. The creatives always exist. They're really good in practice, like chefs always exist. But let's focus more on the teaching you guys how to cook bit. And there's one fundamental flaw with the system that everyone uses, and that is the system that everyone uses, and that's called brainstorming. Brainstorming, I think, is the worst thing for idea generation. It is the worst thing. I don't just think that. More and more research is being developed which shows that brainstorming is the least effective way to create ideas. Yeah, but it's what we all use, right? Because what have we been trained to do differently? And we worked in different organisations where, oh, that brainstorm was fun, but it's sort of like one in a year that was fun. I've just got to the conclusion now that brainstorming is bullshit. I think it really is, or as I start to say, BS is BS. That's the way I remember it now. It's a bullshit technique, and we should ban it completely. Let's just do a little bit of history on brainstorming for those that don't know. So this gentleman here in this relic of a photo from 1939, yes, nearly 80 years ago, is Alex Osborne. He's credited as being the father of brainstorming. And he was an advertising executive in New York. And the sole purpose for him to invent brainstorming was he wanted a group technique to develop ideas as opposed to a singular thing. Pre-1939, apparently, I wasn't there, although I'm close to that age, there were people who would sit at their typewriters or desks or whatever, and they would come up with ideas themselves. And Alex went, aha, what about if we just got 3 or 4 in a room, and we got them to do it together? And we're going to call it, he's in marketing, so of course he had to name it, brainstorming. And what we will do is we'll have, this is the way we generate ideas now. The trouble with that, first of all, that was 80 years ago. Gee, a lot has changed. Second, that wasn't his original intent, how we use it today. His intent was just more than one person thinking, get them in a room. What brainstorming has evolved to be over time is all of these rules that go with brainstorming that are bullshit rules that don't work. One of the rules, all ideas are welcome. You got an idea? Bring, yep, absolutely. Hey, Simon, just shut up. Andrew's got an idea. Great idea, Andrew, fantastic. All ideas are welcome. Doesn't matter if you're good at it or not, all ideas are welcome. The second one is anyone can participate. Doris from accounts, can you come to this brainstorm? Absolutely, you'd be welcome, Doris. Fantastic. You're great at ideas, or maybe you're in the taco market, or whatever justification we've got. And also, we want to make sure that we're being fair to everyone. We want to make sure everyone gets a say, everyone has their chance to cook the meal. Don't judge ideas. That's the other rule that's come in. Let all the ideas get out and we'll judge them later. So we can sit here for 45 minutes while people spout crap ideas, but we don't judge them now, even though we all know this isn't going to happen. We don't have the money. It's not going to work. The client will have, whatever the reason, we just sit shum, don't say anything because we've got to be fair to everyone. And the fourth one that's a crap rule is that quantity is more important. We need more ideas, more. Why? Why? To get the one great idea, isn't that what you're aiming for? That's the whole point of the session, is to get the idea. No. It's got to go an hour. Got the flip charts and the post-its. Oh, God. Okay. The thing that brainstorming also has done is it's given off of that responsibility that we all have to be creative, and we all were creative at one point. In these days, we had to find the answers ourselves. It wasn't brainstorms going on here. It wasn't flip charts and offsites and workshops. There was cavemen coming up with answers for themselves, right? They had to think. They had to go, this is a pretty powerful engine. How can I get that moving to solve the problem that probably hasn't been invented in front of me? The other time of our lives, in modern times, where we've had to think for ourselves is these times. Plastic blocks. Those of us with kids know this. You don't give them instructions. The blocks sit there and they put them on top of each other and they make things, and sometimes they look like a giraffe. Yes, that looks like a giraffe, right? Sometimes they look like nothing. But they're not sitting there with a step-by-step how to do it. And kids will do this on their own, as opposed to like, hey, Tommy, can you help me with my blocks? So we have had the ability to do it over time and ourselves as kids, but it gets knocked out of us, of course, because depending on your level of parenting, and my parents were fantastic, you're either wrong or you should be doing something more constructive with your time. And if you get encouraged by your parents, as a parent you do today, you encourage your kids to create, then chances are you end up more in a creative industry and you practice that craft. But for many of us, it gets knocked out of us because it's not right, and we get told it's not right. So the theory of having idea generators who know what they're doing, I think starts at childhood, and there are three kind of qualities I think that people in their childhood carry through to their adulthood, which makes them great creators. So I'll keep using the chef analogy for now. It's turn them into the chefs of the creative world. And they've got 3 C's, effectively. The first one is they're confident. They're absolutely confident, and they carry that confidence through to adulthood because they're supported, they're encouraged, whether that be through school, different times of their lives. They're continually confident. I'm known for my confidence. I'm very comfortable presenting. I'm very comfortable running a meeting, leading a team, whatever. And someone only said to me last week, "Why are you so confident?" And I just said, "I never believe that I can't do it. It doesn't enter my lexicon that I can't do something until I try it, and then I can't do it." And again, I think that's credit to parenting. My mum said you could do anything you want to do, anything you turn your mind to, you can do. Now, we know as parents now, you can't go, "You're going to be an astronaut, Wade," because I'm not going to be. But the confidence comes through. It does come through, and the great creators keep that confidence going through, and they're willing to try and take risks because they're confident. They're not afraid of failing. The second thing that they carry through all their lives is they're constantly curious. They will ask questions. They'll keep asking questions, and they won't stop until they're satisfied. And then they'll come back and ask some more questions. So creative people generally ask a lot more questions than non-creatives. I reckon at a time when I was on agency side, I could always tell when publishers came to take the brief, who were the curious people and who was going to win. You could almost bet it, run odds on who was going to win the brief by the questions they asked from the outset. The ones that went straight through with the, "What's your campaign timing? What's the demo?" Da-da-da-da-da. You go, "Yeah, cool." Everyone's asking those questions. But it's the person who said, "Why is your logo blue? Like, is there a story there? Tell us about the founder." Someone who asked a more interesting question that generated a story got a better answer out of all their competitors. So they're curious. The other thing is they do very well, and this is a famous Steve Jobs quote, is that creativity is just about connecting things. And this is what I was saying before about taking 1 + 1 to get 3. They're taking something that exists and something else and putting it together and going, well, that's something new. And they're very good at that. And how are they very good at that? Because they've done it all their lives, from the blocks onwards. And they haven't stopped doing that, and they won't stop doing that. So that's what the creators do. How can we learn from what they do and how they do it? And again, this is taking the chef's tricks to help you cook. So the first thing I think everyone can do is work with ingredients, because that's what the creators do. That's what the chefs do. Now, as good as the chefs here are tonight, they're not inventing carrots. They're not creating new vegetables or creating new cuts of meat. They're taking a steak and they're taking a carrot and they're taking something else and going, I wonder what that would taste like together. They don't start with an empty pan and go, where's the ideas? They're just not here. They're not coming. They're not materialising. And part of what we've got to do, I think, as idea generators is recognise that the very worst thing you can do is say, start with a blank page. Because no one starts with a blank page. Everyone brings their experience or their ideas or their thoughts. But we sort of, again, set people up to fail by going, why don't you start with a blank page and come up with completely something new? And for the non-creatives who are non-practiced at that, they're going to go, oh God, where do I start? Oh, this is not going to work. But if you say it in the sense that, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of tools here to use. This, put those together and see what you get out of that. Then you've got something to start with. So we'll show you a technique to do that in a sec. The second thing that you can absolutely do, this is if you don't remember anything else out of this weekend apart from this, I'll be really happy, because this is the number 2 thing. They work as duos. So a question that comes up often, how many people should be in a brainstorm? Bad question. Because the answer is pair people up. Now, we all know this from our own non-work lives in terms of our relationships, right? There's a spark that we get when there's someone we meet and we go, Janine, you're the one for me. I'm sorry to have announced it, by the way, just publicly, but you are. There's a spark, right? We pick up on that spark and we go, I really like that person. Professionally, we don't do that for some reason. We kind of, again, fall for the habit of, we're going to have a big group, or we need 3s, or let's get everyone in groups of 5, or whatever. The overwhelming research about creativity comes down to pairs working together. And sometimes they're obvious pairs, like these 2 gentlemen, right? You can't have one without the other, they work well together, they get the best out of each other, etc. or these two, right? Lennon and McCartney, classic case. Meet when they're 17 or 18 or whatever the age was, and that forms music history, right? So they have a spark. But it also happens when one of the pairs is more dominant, as in the case of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. We all know him, we all know his story, and he's a celebrated one. But they were partners. They did stuff together. And they both said they couldn't do it without the other. But professionally, we don't do that for some reason. Now, I reckon if I challenge you to think about that person professionally you have that spark with, you could think of someone. Someone who, in your workplace, usually a good test is when you've got something new, they're the person you want to ring and tell them about. Hey, we just cracked that campaign, we cracked that idea, or whatever it is for you guys. But I guarantee you, you've got that person. So you might use them informally as a sounding board, but do you use them formally to generate ideas with? So we'll talk about that in a sec on how to do that. The third thing that we can learn from the great creators is they mix it up and they make it exciting. For the parents in the room, you'll know how important this is, right? Dinner in our house has to become exciting now, otherwise no one eats anything. It's just nuggets and chips and whatever. So I've created this bloody thing at home now, which has become a rod for my back, which is different plates for different kids, and start with plate 1. It's like a progressive dinner because I want them to eat the vegetables, but I got to hide the vegetables in number 3. And I've created this crazy ecosystem to get my kids to eat vegetables. But what I'm doing for them is making it exciting, make dinner time different and exciting, rather than just going, it's dinner time, sit down, do the same routine. So what the creators do really well is they don't create things the same way every time. Sometimes they have a beer and do it. Sometimes they have a coffee, sometimes in a room, wherever the atmosphere is, they get their professional partner, the duo, and they bounce and they go back and forth. But they do it in different, exciting ways all the time. The other thing they do, and this is one of the reasons why we created the studio at SCA, was they find hot spots to create in. You know, we wanted a room at SCA that said creativity. Things will be made here. The whole point of having all the imagery around music and recording studios is that sense when you go into a place like that, that ideas will come out of here, things will be made. You're not going to get that of your meeting room, no matter how funky your lights are, or how funky the chairs are, or what words it says on the wall. It's a meeting room. Okay. The fourth thing, again, I said this earlier, but creators ask and ask and ask and ask and ask. And if you can do nothing more than ask more questions when you're taking a brief or sitting with a client or sitting with a customer, you'll be way better off. And this is the number one thing I say to salespeople all the time. Don't go in and ask the same questions your competitor will ask. Just pick one thing that you know they're not going to ask, because you might get one answer that the person you're talking to didn't even think of themselves, but you'll get an advantage by that question. But if you just go in and ask what everyone else has asked, you're going to get the same answer as everyone else, and what advantage have you got? Taking a brief is the best opportunity to be curious and to ask more questions. As Louis C.K. said, a kid never says, okay, thanks, I get it. They just keep coming with more and more questions. Kids are a great example for creativity because they do this, they don't stop. And what's the number one question they ask? Why? 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 Why is the moon this? Why is the like, shut up, I need your chicken nuggets. But you really kind of want to get to a stage where the why is the major question that you ask, and you ask more of it. And the final thing that they do, and this is a really a good exercise in trying to train your brain in a different way, but they use their subconscious. They really actively use their subconscious. 80% of our thinking happens while we're asleep. 80%. While we're conscious and alert, we're only using 20% of our total capacity for thought. 80% happens while we're asleep. Now, for some people, that's through, they remember it through dreams, things that they can recall, weird things usually that happen in dreams. But what creators do is they train their subconscious to give them the answer. Because while you're asleep, you can get your brain to continue work, because it is working, it's thinking. And there's a technique which I'll show you in a sec which helps you do that. So they're the kind of major themes, I reckon, that idea generators do. How do we unlock some idea generating potential in you and your business? Things for you to take away. So the first thing, as I said before, is always start with ingredients. So if we're doing an idea session for this restaurant, how to get more patrons to the restaurant, rather than start with a flip chart with nothing on it, we would start with a few things that make this restaurant iconic, for example. So we'd say the trees, the food, the people, the location. We'd list them individually, and we'd start with those ingredients. And we go, okay, what can we do with these things together? What do we know about trees and food? What do trees and food mean together as a combination? What about food from the trees? What about if we get all the food can perhaps be things that are sourced from nature. Trees equal nature. So we're going to serve only natural food in this restaurant. And so you can start using those ingredients to go, all right, well, if you join those together, what does that mean? It works for every single creative challenge you've got, whether it's a marketing challenge or it's how do we retain our staff better or what can we do for the Christmas party. It's the same thing. Start with ingredients. And that simply means, in a practical sense, never go into the room and go, let's start with a blank page. Go, okay, we need to come up with some new ideas. Here's what we're going to do it for. And here are the 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you think, things to get us started. Always start with something. The chef with the pan and the ingredients. That's what you should remember. The other thing you can absolutely do, really easy to do, when you go back to work next week, is find your partner. Find your professional partner. And if you're running a session with your team, get them to nominate their partner. Don't pair them up yourselves. Don't go, I think you, Simon, and you, Andrea, work well together, so you don't do it like that. Let them find each other. In the same way that you find your life partner, in a professional sense, you want them finding the duo that has a spark. And they don't have to define it. It's not like, I really like working with you because there's just something about the way... No, it's fine. If they've got a spark and connection, and when you're running a session where you want ideas generated, only have them in the room in those pairs and give them the challenge. You might have 5 pairs, 10 people. You might have 20 pairs, doesn't matter. But you only want them working together because it's that spark that will generate the ideas. The third thing is make it exciting. For goodness sake, do not have them in meeting rooms. Make it situational. If you're doing a brief for Nando's, go to a Nando's and do it there. Like, don't fall for the time trap, which is, we've only got 45 minutes, we really need to do it now, we've booked the meeting room, someone's still in there, we're running late, let's get in. That's a trap, right? And in the same way that I said at the start, that we've all got our own fire safety practices, one of the idea generation practices you can have is prioritise it. Really, the differentiator for all of the businesses that we're in now are our ideas. The ideas and the value we offer to our clients and our customers. So prioritise it, make the time, do it properly. It's really important. And make it interesting. Never have one the same as the other. And sometimes that could be just playing a different sort of music when you walk in the room. Sometimes it could be starting with a joke. One of the great techniques is get people warmed up by getting them to talk naturally. So often I'll start a session, like if I was doing one today, I'd say, did anyone watch The Bachelor this week? Right, and immediately the body language changes. People go, oh yeah, so-and-so's a bitch and so-and-so's blah, and like da-da-da-da-da, and away they go. And they're warmed up. Vocally they're warmed up, their brains are warmed up, they're feeling a bit lighter. But if you don't warm people up and they walk into a brainstorming session, the people who are fearful about creating ideas are going to retreat more. The people who are great at it are going to go, like, great, here I am, I'm on. But you want to level the field a bit. You kind of want those people talking about something that does level. So an icebreaker's fine, but pick something that's going to warm up the room and make it interesting and different every time. Ask better questions, as I said. Massively obvious and really easy thing to implement in your businesses next week. One technique is, write down, when you get a brief or when you get a challenge, write down the 10 most obvious questions. Okay, so what's the campaign timing? What are you going to achieve? What's the buying demos? Blah, 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 blah. And then throw those 10 questions away. And you cannot ask those questions. Now come up with 10 more. They can't be the same as the others, and ask those ones. Because you're going to assume that you're going to get the answer to those anyway. At some point you're going to need to know the demo, you need to know the KPIs, whatever sales metrics, that'll all be part of it. You will get that information. So don't waste the time asking those questions. Ask different questions. Ask better questions. Wade, why did you start the business? Wade, why is your logo blue and black? Find things that aren't obvious. Using your subconscious is something you have to train yourself to do. And this is the way I do it. So when I'm going to bed, after checking Facebook, Instagram, Google, etc., I basically lie there and go, subconscious, I look a bit stupid, but I do this, subconscious, this is the problem I want you to work on tonight. I say it to myself. And then I go to sleep. And the next morning I wake up, and whatever my subconscious has spat out, which might have no initial bearing to what the hell that, what? Bananas, that's got to do with, doesn't matter. There's a reason why your subconscious is giving you stuff. There's a technique that works really well, but you actually have to do it. You can't just rely on, I'll just sleep on it. Just let the dreams take us away. You actually have to engage your subconscious. A lot of science behind this that says once you say to your subconscious, hello, I need you to do something, it will respond. You'll look crazy, but it works. It does work. So I'm on a bit of a mission. I want to get rid of brainstorming. if we get together in 10 years' time from now, hopefully you can go, hey, you got rid of brainstorming, that's amazing, I want to get rid of it. And as we all know in sales and marketing, you can't get rid of something unless you replace it, so I'm replacing it. From now on, I'm advocating the ideas method, which is what I've demonstrated for you today. And the 5 principles of the ideas method are ingredients, duos, excitement, ask and ask and ask and ask, and subconscious. And I reckon if you did all those 5 things in your business next week, you are guaranteed to get better ideas. You'll get different ideas. You won't have to waste times in brainstorms. You won't have to be fair to everyone. Everyone's got to have their say. You won't have to sit through listening to bad ideas when you know they're never going to get up. You throw the challenges out like this and you'll actually generate some different ideas and some better ideas. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Simon? Good to see you. Ask questions.
Yep.
Straight away.
So, one of the things about brainstorming is that it's a precise period of time. With yours, should you set deadlines? Like you say to your duos, here are the ingredients, come back to us in 6 days. How do you do the timing?
Does everyone hear that question? Okay, so Simon's question is, in brainstorms there's a set period of time, like we've got 45 minutes to come up with ideas. When you're working with duos, do you set them the same time frame? Do you say, come back to us in 6 days? We're all deadline driven, right? We can't escape the fact we're in a deadline driven industry. But I would be more guided by the duo and how they work than the frame that you put around it. So if you know you've got a duo if you've got a 2-day turnaround, don't go to the guys that take 6 days, who kind of swim their way through it and will play the guitar for 5 of those days and then come up with an idea at the end. What you really want to be able to do is isolate who's right for the problem. And I think that's the contrast I'm trying to make with brainstorming versus the ideas method is you don't need everyone. If you think, okay, who's good at cracking this problem? And I've identified that Simon and Andrew they're a great duo, they've identified that themselves, they work really well together. I would only give it to them. And I would say, hey, listen, I really need something back in a couple of days, if there's a deadline pressure. But I think the 45-minute kind of hour environment that we're all just conditioned of, and remember we all brainstorm because that's all we know, I think that's a problem because effectively you're saying you can only be creative in this time and you don't allow particularly subconscious to work. At the very minimum, I would make sure you get an overnight in. Set up the challenge one day, come back in the next day, even if that's 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. But you want people using their subconscious, and if you give someone a challenge at 5 p.m, what are they going to do and talk about it? They're probably going to have a drink. Great, if that works for you guys, you've found your hot spot, do it that way. The more constrained it is about being in a room, having to come up with a set time frame, you're going to get those cookie cutter ideas, unfortunately. And it gets proven time and time again. And you waste more time because you're actually sitting there hearing bad ideas rather than giving to the guys who are going to give you that one good idea that's a cracker. Does that sort of answer it? So it's look, horses for courses, but we're in a deadline-driven industry, so I don't think you can escape going, you come back to us when you've got an idea whenever, but you pick and choose the pairs and make sure that they're fit for purpose, and most people do need a deadline because something else will get in the way, but give them one that allows all these things to happen, I think is the point. Joe. Hello.
Another question about this. What's the most uninspiring brief you've received and was surprising outcome?
The most uninspiring brief I've received and gave us the most surprising outcome. Oh. I think the hard thing is sometimes with, like I'll put my media hat back on for a second, I think when you get those briefs that start off as a buying brief, you know, like, we're just looking for a rate, it's a buying brief, you know, just do that. And then through the right sort of question and answer teasing, you realise that's not what it's about. Because I think what most people from a publisher side forget is it's actually, people can buy ads, people can ring up and go, can we just book some ads please? Great. When you get a brief, it's not usually about that. It might say that it is, but it's usually about looking for that something special or something extra or a way for a better integration or whatever the criteria might be, right? I can't think of an example off the top of my head, Joe, but I know that usually when you get those sort of general buying supermarket-y style briefs, dare I say, and they look pretty cut and dry, they're usually surprising in the sense that if you've asked the right question, it's going to take it in a place that perhaps even the agency or the client hadn't thought of to that point, which goes back to the asking questions thing.
I love your write them down, thanks not for no tab.
Yeah. It works for a lot of stuff, actually. Yeah, throw away the sometimes even in an idea generation session, you might, if you feel like it's a challenge that creatively could be simple, because some of them are. It's like we just need to come up with a name for something or a promotion for something. Sometimes you do the same principle for the answers. So people come up with 10 things, and we're going to throw those first 10 we've come up with away, and now we need new ideas that aren't those 10. Getting rid of the first 10 often works, because unfortunately, these things can be quite lazy if we let them. So we'll just revert to routine. Unless we say, don't do that, please. We need something new. Yeah, cleanse it.
How do you stimulate a culture that is exposed to great ideas around the world? Because it's not like, if you're not into creative thinking, you're not going to sit there and Google stuff every day. It's
Yep.
creative people that
They go and find that stuff.
they're going to find stuff.
Mm.
And then is there a way to see...
Find the great ideas?
Yeah.
Did you guys hear that okay? So Andrew's asking, is there a way, where do you go to find great ideas? How do you stimulate a culture where people are interested in them? The best way I can answer this is, what makes a great idea? And I think the only thing that you can say, no matter what it's for, whether it's a marketing idea, a product idea, a media idea, whatever, is a great idea is memorable. That's really the best way you can kind of describe it. And if I was going to stimulate a culture on recognising great ideas, the very first thing I do in an organisation is tell me the ideas that you know and like. Get them shared and talked about. Get them coming from the people. Because if I put on the screen today, here are 10 great ideas from around the world, some of you go, that's great. Some of you go, whatever. Some of you might have created them. But the reality is, the more personal it is and the more people bring in themselves, the more they'll be able to recognise it in others. And the memorability is really the key factor in any idea. No matter what category it is, what brand it is, what product you're doing, was it remembered or not, for good or bad reasons. And so I think get people to share their memories of great ideas. I mean, if I was to say to you now, name a TV campaign for the last 30 years, jingles would feature, because, Louis the Fly and Not Happy Jan, and right, they're memorable, right? So that's not new as a theory in marketing by any stretch, but when it applies to the idea generation process, another technique that you can do is when faced with a challenge, ask people to find an idea that's like it, or find a campaign that's like it, or pose a different challenge. If we were Apple, how would we think about this? If we were this brand, what would we do with this? If we were Coca-Cola, how would we launch this new product? And sometimes, again, that's a connection thing. New product plus Coca-Cola equals new idea, right? So we're not creating something new, we're just going 1 + 1, what could that mean for us? And sometimes that will stimulate things better than just a blank page. How do we launch this product? Who the fuck knows? But if you say, how would Coca-Cola launch this product? All of a sudden you might be onto something.
So why is it blue?
Sorry, what was that?
Why is your logo blue?
Why is the logo blue? Well, it's not that an interesting story. I should have told you something different. For some reason, well, my target client are businesses, right? And the business decision makers, effectively, who will use my services, are more likely to be heads of HR and CFOs. Why? Because they control the purse strings. So blatantly looking to businesses who want to improve their idea generation culture. That blue is the same blue as the Financial Review. Not very interesting, is it? But that's why I picked it. I like blue. I like blue. I like black. Yeah.
Where do you see the whole storytelling, right? Because we live in a subjective business, right? As in marketing directors come in and out, and what one marketing director thinks is a great idea, another one thinks is terrible. So I think storytelling has a big role in the idea, and quite often you come up with a great idea. If you don't tell that story right, you get shot down pretty quickly.
So the question's about storytelling. How relevant is storytelling in the idea generation? Well, clearly you can't get ideas off the ground unless you pitch it, sell it properly. And this philosophy, I guess, is more about the generation of ideas. There's a whole other area in terms of how those ideas get sold and pitched and delivered. One of the things that surprised me, in the same way that most businesses don't have an idea generation process, like they would a fire safety process, we don't really have a selling or pitching storytelling process either. And it is a trained skill. It takes all those 3 C's. It takes the confidence, it takes the curiosity, and it takes people to be able to connect and pitch that message. I'm sorry, SCA people, I've told this story so many times you'll be bored by it, but one of the most famous Hollywood pictures of all time is for the movie Speed 2. Right, so, Speed. And they went into the studio and they pitched the movie and got $100 million to make it with 5 words. That's how long the pitch was, 5 words. And the pitch was Die Hard on a bus. And so the story that they were selling was, this is the movie we want to make. We want to make Die Hard on a bus. Now, at that point, are there more questions? Yeah, absolutely. Who's going to star in it? How much it's going to cost? Who's going to direct it? Whatever. But they're on the hook at that point because they've sold the story really well. So one of the techniques that we often have done is, what's your Die Hard on a bus for this idea? How do you get that idea that you come up with, which is really good, down to 5 words, or at the most 1 sentence? And all of us who have recruited over time know that the CV that stands out amongst the people is the one that's done something different or made themselves memorable. You know, and it's the same for ideas, the same for telling stories. So, you know, I think you've got the storytelling and story selling aspect is a big part of this. It's a whole another area of development for people. But if you were to take a technique back into your business, tell the Die Hard on a bus story and challenge every idea that goes out the door to go, yeah, I get the idea, but the client needs to remember something or the customer needs to get hooked on something. What's your Die Hard on a bus for this? And I guess it's a rework of the old elevator pitch style, right? But I think it's got to be more succinct than that. Because if you can't really convey an idea in 5 words, you've probably got to go back and work on the idea a bit. It's a good litmus test. Yes, hello. Sorry, I don't know your name. Hi, Liam. Excellent. Welcome aboard. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the question is everyone hear that okay? So creative agencies process for the most part is, we've got a safe idea, we've got a not so safe idea, we've got a really big idea, what you like. Well, they're just taking out insurance. Really. They're saying, please like us, don't reject all of these. I don't know, I reckon when you hear a great idea, back that one in. Like, you really do know. And if you don't know, you should have asked more questions to get to the stage where you do know. You know, sometimes taking out insurance, if you don't know the client that well, is not a bad idea. You don't want to kind of look, we don't know you that well, so we want to test your appetite for something a bit more conservative, something brave. But I guarantee you they'll be able to sniff which one you're the most passionate about, and if you're a creative agency, you're going to be for the one that, you know, puts cows on the moon or whatever is up this end of the scale that's unaffordable, will never be done. But you kind of want to get to a stage, I think, where in terms of selling, and as the question over here was about the story selling aspect, pick the idea and back that one in and prepare to be wrong on that and lose, rather than have a suite of options that you can choose from just because. And as I said, the only caveat is if you don't know the client that well, it's a little harder to guess. But I'm not a massive fan of it reeks of like, you just want us to like you, so okay, we're paying you for the idea, pick the idea you think will work. So the question is data bad for the idea generation process? Look, I don't think it is bad. I think that there's a place for it. And I think sometimes what happens is, and this is why I'm so against brainstorming, because effectively we in any industry in the Western world only know the one technique, which is get people in a room, has anyone got any ideas? That's really the technique. And then everyone else has got fringe variations of that, different chairs, groups, flip charts, whatever. So when it comes to the use of data, I think what's really important is knowing when to use it in the process. So, would data be helpful for us to understand the consumer before we generate ideas? Absolutely. Getting to know who the consumer is, what their motivations are, what their behaviours are, well, absolutely critical. Does that then come into the idea generation process? It really depends on what the idea generators themselves need. So if you're the kind of cook that likes to follow the recipe, you might feel more comfortable in going, well, this is a really interesting stuff, maybe we just focus on that data point. But you might be a bit more of a freewheeler and going, no, I don't really need that. So I think it's a little bit more subjective than just saying, is it good or bad? I think there's a role for it, but sometimes what happens is you have idea generation processes that are completely freewheeling, brainstorming, like no bad ideas, etc. Or you have the ones that are too data-driven, and they're kind of like, oh, we must find an idea that fits within this box because the behaviour tells us that 63% of cats don't eat blah, blah, blah. I think there's a middle ground. It's got to be a bit more situational. So part of the work that I do with businesses is doing a bit of an assessment around, well, where are you at in that journey? Is data really important for the challenge you're trying to overcome? Buzz.
Yeah, with your pairing of like trees and food and those kind of techniques to come up with ideas, what are a couple of other kind of good techniques to use at the start of a brainstorm, and how sort of long should you set aside for that? Does it need to be not in brainstorm?
Brainstorms are out, mate.
Yeah,
sorry.
in the pairing.
You're so 1939.
Yeah, I know. In the method.
In the method.
What are a couple of other ones, and is there any way you can kind of twist them a little bit to make sure they are becoming kind of relevant ideas rather than
Yep.
just
Yeah, so the question is, are there any other techniques apart from the pairing thing? Look, one of the techniques that I use a lot and I quite like is I prefer to run sessions a bit more like a focus group. So if we were running a session here right now and it was about how to get customers to the restaurant, rather than me start with, hey, we need new customers to the restaurant, pair up, come up with ideas, etc. I might start it more as a conversation. We'd probably start with a conversation about The Bachelor, then we move on to a conversation about the restaurant. And I might start by asking the group, for example, where are some of the most memorable places to eat a meal in the world? And you might say the Eiffel Tower because you've been there, and someone else might say Spain because they've been there. And so the personal experiences start to warm the group up. And then you might go, okay, so Eiffel Tower, tell me about the Eiffel Tower, Cam. Yeah, well, it's iconic because you're off the ground and famous people eat there. And Janine's gone, well, in Spain, what's really interesting is the beaches, the location. So they might go, well, hang on a minute. There's something about the weather that is why Janine's raised the beach. It's really interesting. And yours is about elevation. So how can we bring to life the weather and the elevation? So sometimes the skill, and this is probably something I should have called out at the start, your facilitator of the session can't generate ideas. They're there to facilitate the session. If you've got someone who is the great idea generator, don't get them to facilitate, because the only outcome they want is their idea getting up. And the session's a waste of time. So in this example, I would go, okay, I'm running a sort of a focus group methodology. I'm going to ask lots of questions. And when I get to a point where I feel comfortable to go, yeah, okay, so now we've got a few things on the table. Why don't you guys work together and see what you can find in common or different or new about weather and iconic location. What does that mean? And if we were doing it then, bringing it back to the challenge for this restaurant, it might be, how well do they market the fact that it's always 26 degrees out here, or do they focus too much on trees, for example? Obviously it's hard to do hypothetically, but yeah, that's the other technique I think is quite useful, is the facilitator has to be as curious to get to the outcome, and they have to be as egoless to not want their own idea. They're trying to facilitate a conversation to get things going and let the pairs